Hi, my name is John and I'm a member of the Nobby Owners Association. This month we're bringing you the episode 2 of the Pride of Liverpool project. A little bit of a change of format this time, a longer video. We've had to adapt to the circumstances because obviously we can't have volunteers down on site. What we were planning to do over the next few months is to have a series of cameos, interviews with members, asking them a set list of questions about their boats, their interests, how they became involved in the Nobby Owners Association. And this month we're going to do the first of those interviews. The interviews are going to be conducted by our treasurer, Jonathan Warren, and the first two are to be interviewed are our president and our secretary. So without further ado, because it's quite a long video, but be patient because there's some good stuff on there, I will then pass you over to Jonathan's capable hands. Thank you.
Kevin and Tom, thank you for coming in to our little coffee shop chat. And really, we want to say hello to all the viewers out there. And in the top left-hand corner of the screen is Kevin, the Nobby Owners Association president, and in the top right-hand corner of the screen is Tom, who is our secretary. And the idea behind the interview is just to give you a little bit of an insight into who we are and what we do. I also occupy a role. I am the honorary treasurer. That's right. I'm the treasurer, and I sort of keep tabs on the comings and goings of the funding, and I also chair the subcommittee that's doing the project. So I hope we can edit that out too. You're not supposed to scratch your nose when you're doing these bloody things. Jesus, this is difficult. So really, what I want to kick off with is how did we become interested in Nobby themselves? And so perhaps Kevin, how did you become interested in Nobbies?
Well, my prime interest actually is in wooden boats, and it started off 20 years ago now, when after 30 years of powerboating around the UK and Europe, and the price of my Cairo practice was such that I had to look for an alternative water sport. So my basic thought was to find an old wooden boat, because I was used to fast boat navigation and not slow boat navigation, whereby I could get used to rag and stick and go sailing locally. I eventually found a boat, and it was quite an old boat, as it turns out, and I needed some help with it. So I scouted around and found this wonderful association called the Nobby Owners, who were very much into very old wooden boats.
And so you bought your boat, you've owned your boat for roughly how long?
20 years.
Wow. Tom,
Yeah.
how did you are the, I dare not say doyen, but there you go, of Nobby owning, because you've been involved in the club for, I know, many, many, many years. How did you become interested in the first place?
It's rather a strange story, really, a little bit like Kevin. I became interested in gaff sail initially when I was 7 years old and sailed a skiff.
Wow.
Which was a strange looking thing, clinker built thing. And that went on through my school years, really, until I left school at 16. And then I went on from that to sailing in between 16 and 19 extensively to try and get the whole thing out of my system. And then when I was 19 years of age, nearly 20, I effectively gave up on sailing for a very long period of time. And a friend of mine, not far away from where I live here now, he said to me, "Would you like to buy a boat, Tom?" So I said, "What sort of boat?" He said, "Don't worry about it." I said, "Boat, I've got one. And they're wonderful things. It's made out of wood and it sails." I said, "Is it a gaff sailing thing?" "Yes, it is." "How much is it?" "It's £3,000. "Where is it?" "It's up in Workington." And so I said, "Oh, all right." Anyway, we discovered it was in Maryport, not Workington, so I didn't know that much about it. But having said that, I did say to him, "All right, I'll have it. Who owns it?" And so it was a Mr. Dixon, actually, David Dixon, John Dixon, don't quite remember. But this was in 1987.
Wow.
So it's 32 years ago now. And I remember being driven up there by my friend Chris to see this boat. He thought I was going up to see it. I was going up to buy it. And when we knocked on the door of the fellow who was selling it, he said, "Oh, come and I'll show you the boat. Is there anything with it?" And so, he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Has it got any sails, any bits here in the house you can throw in the car now?" "Well, you haven't seen it yet. I haven't come here to see it. I've come here to buy it. If you've got any bits, put them in the back of the car and we'll go down, tell me where the boat is. I'll give you the money here." And so anyway, he didn't bother with any of that. He took me down to the boat, put a few things in the boot beforehand, of course. And when I saw it, I didn't even know what it was. So you asked me when I first became interested in Nobby. I actually owned a Nobby before I knew it was a Nobby. I didn't honestly realize I'd purchased a Nobby. So I made some inquiries afterwards, and I found it to be a wonderful thing. It was early 1987, I think. I always remember that for a very particular reason. We drove up there some months after I bought the boat. So I left it up there for a little while, played about on it. And I discovered that it might work, it might sail. So I put some sails on it one day whilst I was up there, and it looked all right. So that was wonderful. And my youngest daughter, Laura, who was born in 1987, May 1987, she was breastfeeding in the back of the car. So I always remember that as something which happened, and it reminded me when I first bought the boat. Anyway, I did go up there to bring it back down to Liverpool, where it came from, in fact, in the first place. Liverpool, fished here for many, many years. And I went up and put the sails up, got as far as the outer parts of the dock, and the thing started filling up with water. So I realized if I couldn't get it out of the system, I wasn't going to get it to Liverpool. So I went back in and decided it needed to get to Liverpool on a wagon, which is what I actually did. And it was late in 1987 when I got it into the Collingwood dock, or on the Hard there, determined to get it in the boat, into the water. Sorry, I was never one of those people who fancied the idea of buying a boat to do up for 100 years and then be dead before I could actually get to use it. I wanted to use it, so I found a couple of people who did boat building work in a workmanlike manner. I told them I wanted it in the river sailing the following year, and they were to do their best to achieve that. And then I'd do it up piecemeal as the years went by. And it took me, I think, 7 or 8 years in the end to actually get the boat into good condition. And I've tried to keep it in that sort of condition ever since.
Wow.
That's just a brief story, I'm afraid. Nothing very...
What's very interesting is that between the three, among, I should say, the three of us, is that none of us really had an interest in nobbies to begin with. And like Kevin, I prefer junk rig, frankly, but I've always liked gaff rig. And so many years ago, when I was still in South Africa, I found a book called Practical Junk Rig in a secondhand bookshop. And I'd sort of decided that that's where I was going to go. well, that was all very fine and dandy until I came here, and I was here for a number of years, and then I went for a walk along the river in at Skipple Creek rather. And then I saw a boat which had a for sale sign on it, and that was the world famous Lucy, which of course is a plastic nobby, just like Pride is. And Bob Rayner was the owner, and he'd, I think, just bought Ploughboy, and so he was looking to get rid of it. And so mine cost twice yours, actually. But then, you know, Bob was very clever. What he did was he had a little fire going. And of course, as you come into the boat and there's the warmth from the stove, everything looks, you know, very good. And so very quickly I parted with my cash. And so, well, thanks to a bank loan. And then, well, that's where it all started. And you know, of course, one goes, puts the boat in the water, goes sailing. And then I foolishly did what you didn't do, Tom. And that is that I noticed that the after deck was a little bit spongy. And so we came up onto the hard just to sort out the sponginess. And I foolishly said to two cadets who were helping me, I said, just take out all the rot that you can find. And I came back and they had taken the whole stern deck off. I mean, this was, you know, in the course of an afternoon. And that was obviously, as you can imagine, problematic, because from that point onwards we had shed, and that project lasted 7 years. Lucy never went back into the water, but was sold eventually to somebody who did her up as a fishing boat. So that's very interesting. So we've sort of between the three of us, we've sort of bought the boat because it was the available thing at the time. And of course, both of you have got authentic wooden boats built many years ago. That leads us quite nicely, actually, into Kevin said that he'd heard of this organization called the Nobby Club, and he thought that there was this body of knowledge. And so, Tom, you know, you've been around with your boat since '87, and that would have been very close to when the club started.
The club was founded in 1987, yes. It came out of what I think was known then as the Seabird Association. In fact, we adopted the Seabird Association's rules. I wasn't a founder member of the association, though you're quite right to draw on the fact I bought my boat in 1987, joined the club, but I wasn't a founder member. But yes, I've been around since the early times. And you mentioned, incidentally, very old boats. I should perhaps tell you something I thought was quite amusing, or at least interesting. The Spray was built in 1896, and most nobbies you'll find were named after ladies, either sister, daughter, you know, someone in the household, someone's wife. And the idea was it was lucky. And a nobby would be commissioned by a father for the benefit of his son to give him a living effectively when he got married. And the name of the boat would be, as they all are, Lucy in your case, but even though that's a name given to it as a plastic replica, it was nevertheless a lady's name. But the names of most of the boats was a lady's name. Now, mine was Spray, and I could never understand why it was called Spray. I just couldn't, no idea at all. And when I started looking up Morecambe Bay prawns, I became more and more interested in them. When I started sailing the thing, it was better than anything I'd ever sailed before in terms of ease and stability and understanding what it wanted to do. And you know, people used to ask me, "You have lots of people going out with this?" I go out two, that's all. That too, you know, when I'm going out there, nobody could see anyone else. One was the boat and the other was me, because you get to understand each other. Anyway, we're talking about Spray as a name. And I made some inquiry, and this may be a lot of rubbish, but I did make inquiry, and this is what came out of my inquiry. In 1896, when Spray was built and first launched, Joshua Slocum was sailing around the world in a boat called Spray. And I don't think Slocum had quite finished sailing around the world when Spray was launched. I think he took 3 years to do it, and I think he finished his sailing sometime shortly afterwards. Anyway, I was told that in the absence of a lady, the owner of my particular Nobby decided to call it Spray, because he felt if a boat called Spray of a similar size could actually get 3/4 of the way around the world successfully, then I'm going to call this boat Spray, and that'll be lucky enough for me. And that was the story of Spray, because it is one of the very, very few boats, Morecambe Bay Prawners, ever launched with a name other than a lady's name.
That's very interesting, Tom. You know, when you said Spray, I did think of Joshua Slocum, and that reminds me of another story, but it's not for this forum, about Harry Pigeon, whose boat Islander has a bit of a history as well. Kevin, how has your membership of the club, how have you found that beneficial?
Well, so when I came along to the first meeting of the club, I found that the people there were quite unpretentious, a lot like the boat which I just purchased. And believe it or not, with being a member of other sailing clubs, it was very refreshing, and everyone was very open and very helpful during the restoration of Phyllis. It took a little while. I think I was in the association for 4 years before the boat actually hit the water.
Wow.
Which of course was a little bit galling for me, because like Tom, I wanted to be on the water as soon as I possibly could. But sort of notwithstanding that, we eventually got her onto the water, which is good. And everyone was quite joyous about it. And we actually celebrated her 100th birthday as well. In Liverpool Marina, when we had a very interesting party when Frances, my good lady, actually fell into the dock on that particular day.
Entirely my fault, that was, incidentally.
I seem to recall having a party for Phyllis when I was living on Laxaganda in the Marina, and it was on that fishing boat. Now, I'm not sure if that was the launching or whether that was the 100th birthday celebrations.
No, sort of that was a 100th birthday celebration. She's now 108 years old.
Wow. Yeah,
so,
because
she's a little bit younger than Tom's, but she's a younger lass anyway. She's sort of 20 years younger than Tom's. Oh, 25 okay. Years actually, yeah.
Because I used to know David Moss quite well, because and he and I got talking again at your party, and because in those days I didn't really know anybody in the Nobby Club, because I've never been close to the whole social circle. And it was interesting because what struck me was precisely what you said, which is that people are unpretentious and they come together, and generally over something nice and sociable like food and wine,
and beer.
Absolutely, and beer. I mean, what can we say? And in fact, I think that that really has been a major benefit for the membership. I mean, I think that the club itself exists for its members, and how far, we're going to have to edit this, how far do we go into the future is really the question, because our membership is getting on a bit now. And certainly if one looks back to the way that things were, Tom, you've been around in the club for the last 30 years. How have you seen things change?
There's been enormous change since I joined the club. In the early days, it was very easy to acquire a boat cheaply. I paid £3,000 for sprayers, I say. It needed a lot of work on it before it would sail safely. And I did that in Liverpool. It was on the Liverpool dockside where there was no cost to keep it there. Everybody was extremely helpful. I managed to find a couple of lads to do the work for me, lovely lads. I call them lads that are older than me, and one of them's gone now.
That'll be Tommy.
Actually, no, it's a chap called Jack Spriggs. And the other is in rather poor health, unfortunately. But anyway, they did some work for me on the boat. Charged me very little for it because they were both owners of Morecambe Bay Prawners. And I think the upshot of it all is you could buy a boat then for very little. You could even have one given to you, get a tremendous amount of help doing it up. On the dock system, obtain whatever wood you wanted, offcuts and various other things thrown about. Everybody helped each other. There's a lot of camaraderie and that sort of thing involved. And I think I got my boat from Maryport down into Liverpool and in the water, for less than 5,000 quid or something like that initially. Now, as time's actually gone by, those facilities have become less and less available until they've disappeared altogether. It isn't possible now to use the commercial docks at all. In Liverpool, it isn't possible to put your boat anywhere to do it up without having to pay substantial fees for having it wherever you decide to put it. Wood's expensive, everything's expensive. The fact of the matter is, we cannot attract young people into the association because it's too expensive to actually do the work, and young people have too many commitments, and we had to think of something. And of course, the pride of Liverpool is one such thing. A lot of people will criticize a traditional boat club for doing up a plastic boat. What are you doing that for? It's Tupperware. Leave it alone. But the fact of the matter is, when you do up a knobby, a traditional knobby, you save it. You do save it. You're saving one boat. That's all you're doing. You're saving one boat. You're not doing anything to actually get youth into the system at all. With a plastic one, they are very much cheaper to keep. Young people are interested in gaff sale, but just not capable of paying what it costs to have something of their own. And if you can get young people interested in the early days in Morecambe Bay Prawners, even if it is because you're getting them interested in a plastic one that was produced, 30 years before, that's all. As time goes on and they get a love for these things, there is always the chance, a high chance, I think, that they'll move on from that later in their lives and buy a traditional boat. So I think there is a lot of merit in actually doing up a replica Morecambe Bay Prawner to get people who wouldn't otherwise be able to enjoy such a thing to enjoy it, firstly, and secondly, people who couldn't buy one because of the cost.
Well, that's a very interesting point, Tom.
And get them hooked is the thing it will do.
That's a very interesting point, Tom, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but I think, I remember being at the AGM when this subject was first mooted, and I think it came from you, Kevin.
Yes, I think I recall that particular meeting. And I think basically it was really subscribing to Tom's comments there, that we can't attract at the moment the sort of younger age range because of the high cost of acquisition. And knowing full well that a good GRP boat, which is what the pride of Liverpool is based on, which is the Sir John Priestley, is a good alternative to a traditional boat to try to get interest from the youngsters. And the important thing is that this particular boat has actually been donated to the club, and it is a complete boat.
Yes.
Although it does need some work doing on it, there is no expense at all in any of the equipment that is needed to get the boat on the water.
So, with the subcommittee who's looking after the actual restoration, we are not quite sure at this point how we want to restore the boat in the sense of, do we want to go for a half decker or do we want to have a small cabin? Now, one of the reasons I raised this issue is because certainly since your presidency has begun, and of course you've set up and revitalized the previous website, giving it a modern look and feel, what certainly stands out as a club is our sailing program. And I think between yourself and Tom and various other members, when you did your Irish sojourn, a few Irish sea sojourn, I should say, or maybe it should be the Guinness sojourn, a few couple of years ago now. I think that this has really drawn in interest, and how would you see Pride, for example, taking part in our sailing program? Well, Pride, of course, was seaworthy, etc.
Yes, well, I'm sure that she will be in a very short space of time. As soon as we get out of this lockdown situation, I think it will be fairly rapid that we'll be able to get her onto the water. Personally, I would prefer, in terms of costs and getting as many members as possible and guests on board, that a half decker would be the best solution. It is possible with a half decker to put overnight berths in, but obviously not for long distance cruising. But having said that, we have enough accommodation on our traditional boats to accommodate anyone who actually needs dry accommodation at the other end. So I really see the fact that we could be taking more people on these adventures, as I call them.
Yep.
And I'm quite looking forward to that.
Well, do you know what springs to mind? When you're talking in terms of adventures, where you have these open boats, like I'm desperately trying to remember the name, but they have raids, and they go from portlet to portlet, and they all Loch Fyne is what I was thinking of.
Right.
And they go from place to place, essentially day sailing. And I think that would be quite achievable for a small boat. And Tom, you mentioned Workington and Maryport and places like that. There are a wealth of small places in the Irish Sea which would be able to accommodate such a thing in the sailing program, don't you think?
I think nearly every port can accommodate a Morecambe Bay prona. They're very shallow drafted boats. Very few of them have more than 5 feet of draft. Mine's just 4 foot, I think, something like that. 4'3" when it's laden with people. So not a great deal of draft. Very few places will actually turn a Morecambe Bay prona away. Difficult to get to into some small bays, perhaps. Always sensible to try and choose somewhere where you can moor up against a pontoon or put the boat on a mooring. I think it's a mistake, really, if it's a very old wooden boat, to put it up against a wall.
Yes.
With a lot of, water movement inside an open area where there's tidal waves and so on like that.
But apart from that, you've also got things like staples and ladders and so on sticking out of harbour walls, which of course could do irreparable damage to a wooden boat.
Well, that's right. I mean, we shouldn't really talk of them as being weak because they're old. They shouldn't be. They should still be strong boats, but they are nevertheless wooden boats, and wooden boats can be damaged quite easily with a little thump.
Yes, but the advantage of a wooden boat, of course, is that it can be repaired quite easily as well, because all you're going to do is you're going to slide in another plank and bang zoom, there you are. See, I nearly became rude just then.
Last year when Kevin and I were away, and Kevin kindly showed me the way through the Menai Straits because I hadn't been through there before, and we stopped at a bridge somewhere, I can't remember what it was, and I'm not as careful as I should be. I know if I've got someone else's boat, I'll be careful with it, but I don't really mind too much with my own because I take it out of the water every year, and if anything needs doing, it simply gets done, and if it's a little bit more. And we had someone with us, a young lady, rather nice young lady, Tanya McCormack, was one of our members. In the crew, and yes, and I bumped up a little hard against the pontoon there by the bridge where we were going to get off and have some lunch, and I just got Tanya made me laugh. She looked at me and smiled. She said, "Do you just rebuild your boat every year?" So I thought was rather amusing.
So the Menai Strait, that's actually very interesting, because you see that one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, both of you, was what's the most interesting place that you have sailed to?
Well, I'll be honest with you, Jonathan. I've got 5 favourite places, and it's very difficult to distinguish between them. But for me, obviously that we do a lot of sailing in the Irish Sea, but for me it is Howth or Uth.
Howth. I was very nearly harbour master of Howth.
Okay, I'm in Dublin, and of course what I like there is the fresh fish restaurants, which actually line the whole of the quayside, which is very, very accommodating, should I say. Then after that, the Gobbins or Gobbins, which are sea cliffs off Northern Ireland. Then there is the Menai Straits, of course, which we referred to earlier. I just love the Menai Straits because it's so handy for us in the northwest, and the UK, and of course the Isles of Bute in Scotland, which is very special, a very special area to sail through, and of course finally, because I like the Isle of Man as well, is actually going through the gap at the Calf of Man.
Yes, I've been through there.
Yeah, it's quite challenging, but at the same time, it's quite exhilarating.
Just off Chicken Rock there as well, you can. What I think is great to see is you can see the tidal stream confluence, as it moves up and down.
Yes.
Tom, what about you?
Well, if I stick to the same sort of area then, so that we're together, since I've been a member of the association, I rather like the places that have a more natural attraction to them. So I do love the restaurants that go with the modern and well-appointed places. But I love Ardglass. I love the little harbour in Ireland. I love Port St Mary. It's just at the bottom there of Man. There's not much.
Port St Mary, if my memory serves me correctly, you can get in at any state of tide, I think.
Well, that is why I like so many places. I don't necessarily want to go somewhere where I'm restricted. If I want to leave, I don't want to say what time is it. Will we be there? Will we be able to get in? I never really like the idea of that. I just like to get in the boat, go somewhere and tie up when I get there. And I really do enjoy that. And the thing about the Irish Sea, there are so many places where you can get in at any date of the tide. Very few places are restricted. I know, of course, Peel is. Portland Mary isn't, but Peel is, though it's not too bad. Even Howth, which you've just mentioned, is all right, but at low water, you can actually find yourself on the bottom in the marina there. It's quite a strange place, but I'll go with, I've got Port St Mary there on my mind. I've got Ardglass, which I rather like. But I think in terms of the more modern places, I'll go for Howth as well, not just because of the marina. They don't give you a tremendous amount of space there to get an old boat in and out. The only way I can maneuver spray in and out of a berth is to get a pole and shove it out and away from the other boats until it's pointing to go home, and then I can move. But of course, one of the disadvantages of an old boat is going to a marina that try to cram as many boats in as possible, and they're full because we don't have the maneuverability of those things. We really don't. I like to pride myself with the thought I do it with a bit of skill. When we left Howth last time, I put the thing in, just ticking over in reverse, was going backwards. The chappie jumped up on the back of his boat and he thought I was going to hit it or something like that. And then I got out my big stick and just shoved the spray around behind the other boats. He looked at me and smiled and he said, "You've done that a few times before, haven't you?"
The advantages of a long keel, I think, are many. But tight marinas, of course, where, as you say, it's sardines that are jam-packed into the modern marina, is a definite downside. So just last few questions before we call it a day, and that is, what are your impressions of the locals when you arrive in your favorite place and they see a traditional boat? How do you think people respond in general?
Well, I would say extremely positively, to such an extent that you end up sharing a wee drum in the late hours of the day with them. But yes, they're always interested about the boat, where we've been. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So it's a very positive, and then it's just a good feeling that you've arrived, and that people are actually watching all the boats coming in and out, and you don't actually sort of realise that, because I remember once going to Kirkcudbright, which is the southern part of Scotland, and as I got there, it was a brand new place I'd never been to before, and there was this chap jumping up and down on the pontoon, and he led me into a perfect berthing spot. He said, "I saw you on the other side of the river." He said, "And I've run all the way around to see the boat." That was fantastic.
Yes, absolutely. I certainly go along with that. I've found exactly the same throughout all my years owning spray. Can't take it anywhere. Can't take a Morecambe Bay prawn anywhere without someone having some interest in it. And in fact, talking about Ireland, I've got a feeling Kevin and I left Howth one day. I think we were going north. I think we were going north, and we pulled into a place where, I say I don't like sandbanks and that sort of thing, where you did have to wait a little while to get in, and that was Malahide. And we went into Malahide and moored up there. Quite a lovely little place, Malahide. But I remember we were in the harbour master's shed, getting ourselves organised and clocking in and so on. And I remember the harbour master saying to Kevin, or perhaps to both of us, "They're the nicest boats we've seen in this marina for a very long time." And I thought, well, isn't it lovely? Someone should say that to you.
Mm, mm.
It's just one of those things you appreciate. It makes you love the thing even more. When it's working well, of course, as they always do, we have something that's aged, something that's of great interest to lots of people, something that's eminently usable. I'd rather sell my boat than a modern, plastic boat any time. Much easier to sell, much more stable in the water, which of course comes out of the sail configuration, doesn't it, for those who don't know. The modern Bermudan rigged boat, they're built for speed. Whilst people talk about water line length, and the longer it is, the faster you go there. It's only part of the story. The fact that
Correct.
When you are going along at some speed with a Bermudan ring boat, the sail configuration actually assists in lifting the boat out of the water. So you're going along at a speed which is not only consistent with the maximum you can get on water line length, but there's less resistance because of the lift. With a gaff rigged boat, of course, the sail configuration is such that the boat is actually kept down in the water. It's pressed down onto the water surface. So instead of bouncing around on the waves, you find yourself ploughing through them nice and steadily, beautifully. And I just can't think of a better way of actually sailing and passing, time. If you're like me and you love things from the past and you're sensitive about that sort of thing, you get in your old motor car, 100-year-old motor car, and you're using the seat to sit in and the steering wheel to steer it, and so on and so on. But the fact of the matter is, you've got to drive it on a modern road because that's all there is to drive it on. And you put it in the car park, and you go to Sainsbury's or whatever, and you've got your old car. An old motorcycle is exactly the same. If you actually take a Morecambe Bay prawn out to sea, so that you can't see anything other than water, and you're sailing, you're experiencing exactly the same thing a sailor experienced over 100 years before.
Yes.
And I can't think of a better way of stepping back in time than that. And it's something I really love.
Yes, I do concur. So I think we need to bring our conversation, sadly, to a close. The last thing I think that I want to perhaps raise is the future. What do you think, and who do you think will benefit from this project that we are currently undertaking? Kevin?
Well, straight away, we've got quite a healthy membership who don't actually have boats, and I think straight away that it will provide the platform for them to be able to go out and enjoy the sailing along with all the comrades that they've got in the club. But I also feel as well that it will attract some of the younger people who are very interested in traditional sailing boats. And I think that the match between the experience we've got in the club and youth coming in, I think will be very good for the future.
Thank you, Kevin. Tom, what do you think? Who do you think will benefit from this project?
Well, I certainly think it will benefit youth. And I have a reason for saying that, which is personal. And that personal reason, of course, is alongside Spray, I also own another boat called Mystery 2. Mystery 2 is in a poor state of repair. It's currently in a school playground, school, Liverpool Community College's grounds, and it is going to be done up by students there. And those students hopefully will be people who will be available for folks such as I in the future when we need some work done on our boats and we're finding it difficult to find someone with the skills to do it. Youth being trained now to do that is to me very important. But I think it will also encourage youth to take a great interest in this particular class of boat. And I think the people who work on Mystery 2 over the next 2 or 3 years, in fact, it may even be 4 years before the boat is completed because of the nature of it and the size of it. There's no shortage of students who will say to me, good Lord, when this thing's finished, do you think we can have a go on it? You know? So there's no doubt at all that young people have the greatest of interest in such things. They just don't have the means to actually enjoy them without help from somebody else. And through Pride of Liverpool, I just hope that our association or our Nobby Club is that something else they can rely on to get an inroads into the love for such things.
Well, I tend to agree with you. I think that what this will do is I think that it's a very positive thing, and I think that that it will enable not just the youth, but I think that those people who perhaps are bringing up young families and can't really afford to own a boat might be able to take part in this, in the project as it's going along, those DIYers and woodworkers and dare I say fiberglassers, as well as once the boat is ready and Pride is in the water, then what we could do is obviously volunteers who've taken part would I'm sure relish the opportunity to sail the boat in the future. Well, thank you very much, both of you, for finding time in your busy schedules to have this conversation. And what will happen is we will plug on, get Pride ready, and very soon we can have a launching ceremony and see where it goes from there. Thank you very much.